Thank you for taking time with me today. I'm Jonathan Staley, part of the MURAL Imagine team, and I've got with me Matt Kropp. For those who don't know who Matt is, Matt, could you please talk about who you are, what you do? What's the 30-second intro you'd like to tell people about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a managing director with Boston Consulting Group in San Francisco. I spend all my time working on pricing. So pricing strategy, particularly around tech companies and SaaS businesses. So that gets us quite involved in working around commercial functions and working with helping sales forces get better pricing and better, better margin, better market share.
Now, I was super excited to read your blog, and I want to dig into the readiness assessment. So tell us a little bit about, just kind of set the scene. What is BCG's COVID readiness assessment?
So this is at the beginning of the shelter in place period. We wanted to see what impact was this having on sales, essentially, and sales organizations. And so we put out a benchmark survey. We sent this out to an organization called SAMA that represents account management executives, essentially, basically outside, inside salespeople. And we had, several hundred survey respondents answer a variety of questions around what they expected to happen. So what was the impact of COVID going to be on their accounts and their business? Answer questions around what capabilities had their organization put in place to support them, essentially, within this, this current environment. And then really, how much are they adopting best practices? So we have, as part of this assessment, I would encourage your listeners to go take it. It's free. You can go get access to it from our blog. It has a series of questions around best practices and where are they on different dimensions. So how do they think about segmenting accounts? How do they think about setting up their environment? How do they think about managing discounts, for example, and then scoring themselves on a 1 to 5 scale. So it was really a way for us to get a good sense of the attitude of sellers around the current environment, but then also to get a sense of how mature were their organizations along these dimensions.
Can you paint us a portrait of what a ready organization looks like?
Mm-hmm.
What would that feel like to somebody who's familiar in this environment?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to be able to work in shelter in place. So there's sort of, there's the, do I have my basics in place? But basics is more than just a laptop and a webcam and a second monitor. Basics is also, do I have enough emotional support for my sellers? Do they, am I giving them the tools they need essentially to be successful in a work from home environment? Am I giving them sort of the cultural and the mental support? Second then is essentially having a game plan. You will have customers saying, I need a discount, or I need to stop, I need to pause or cancel. And so being prepared, knowing ahead of time who is going to make that call, and then what offer you have in hand to give them when they call is very important. Because very often for a salesperson, they're predisposed to try to help their customers. That is really the orientation of a seller is on the part of the customer. I'm trying to help you solve your problem. That's what makes a good salesperson. Problem is that orientation also can turn into significant discounting or significant giveaway of value. And so you want to arm your salespeople with an answer. And that answer may be, I'll give you an example. We had have a client who is in information services, high-priced subscriptions, essentially, into business-to-business customers. And they had exactly this happen when the COVID slowdown started. Customers were calling saying, we need to cancel or we need to pause. They were very smart. They very quickly came up with a proactive offer where they said, we know you're all going to work from home. the customers had subscriptions to products that are essentially on premise at their office. So those products are worthless if their users are at home. So they said, we will give you all free licenses for work for home for 90 days. So basically you take off the table this request for, a pause or a cancel, and you say, look, you can still work from home. You can use our web-based licenses. We're not going to charge you for it. And that essentially answered that objection for the sellers and made it so that they could be on the side of the customer without losing business, without discounting their core product. So this is, in terms of what are some best practices, have a plan, have an account plan, have a set of offers, have flexibility that you can offer your customers. And then the last thing is have controls in place. So have a way of reviewing deals. And this is best practice even if you're not in COVID times. This is just best practice for pricing in general. You want to make sure that you have clear guidelines for your sellers as to when they can discount, by how much they can discount on their own discretion, and then what is the escalation point at which they need approval for additional discount beyond a certain point. And that you have a body, a pricing committee is usually what we call it, which is empowered to make those approval decisions. By having that structure in place, that pricing committee starts to see how much pricing pressure there is in the market. And in a time like this, you're going to see a lot of it. You're going to see a lot of requests coming in from the sellers saying, hey, my customer is, and going through really hard times. They're a cruise ship company. I need to give them a discount. Having that central pricing committee that can see everything that's happening and make strategic choices about where they're willing to give lower prices versus where they're actually going to hold the line is really critical.
Very useful deep dive. That was a great detail. You have a unique vantage point where you're talking about pricing across a bunch of different industries, and this is your day in and day out. What might be surprising to people who don't have your vantage point about the maturity of the companies you surveyed in the readiness report?
Yeah, I was actually surprised at how low the maturity came out in a lot of these companies. I was expecting, I think, I certainly was expecting people to be a bit caught off guard by COVID. So, some of the dimensions around just the support for, the work from home environment, for having these flexible options like I was talking about, those are, sort of a special circumstance right now. So I'm not surprised that companies were not prepared there. I was a little bit more surprised to see that not that many companies rated themselves very highly in terms of having this discipline mechanism. So as I said, it's really important in turbulent times like now, because you need to have that, that tight rein essentially on your pricing, but it's equally as important all the time because that's how you steer your pricing strategically. So it was a bit surprising to see that maturity was fairly low.
You had a recommendation around setting up a digital war room. What are its advantages compared to just your regular sales account meeting?
Especially in times like this, especially in turbulent times, you need to have an ability to be very reactive, to be quickly reactive, and you need to be strategic. And so you need to be reactive because you're going to have customers coming at you, you're going to have deals coming at you that if you're not able to come up with a decision, say I need to be able to go lower on price, or I'm going to hold the line on price, or I'm going to give something else as a way to try to win that deal. If I can't make that decision quickly about what I'm going to allow, I may lose the deal. So I have to have that speed to decision. At the same time, I have to be able to see across deals and understand what's happening. Is the market deteriorating quickly, or is it actually not so bad? I gave the example of this software company reacting to the work from home situation. At that time, when we all had to go work from home, nobody knew what was going to happen. I mean, this could, it could have been really, really bad. And actually in their business, at least, it turned out to not be that bad of a situation. They sort of got through that initial uncertainty, and then things pretty much stabilized. But you have to be able to have that strategic view in order to steer what you're doing with your sellers. So what the war room does it is the typical sales meeting, or you typically employ it in your weekly sales meeting, say, but you bring data, which is not what is you typically see in a sales meeting. So you bring a set of dashboards. You want to have a digital dashboard, especially today, since everybody's going to be on Zoom. And in that dashboard, you're looking at things like, how's your revenue trending? How's your price realization trending? So how is your win-loss trending? What are your margins doing? What are your big wins? What are your big losses? And having that information in front of the sellers so that as they're talking about account planning, as they're talking about their upcoming deals that they're negotiating, or as they're talking about the deal that just won or lost in a retrospective, you're basing that discussion in data, not just in anecdotes. It becomes very powerful because you get the whole sales organization thinking about, how do I steer my metrics, as opposed to sort of how do I defend that one deal or defend the one discount that I want to get in the future. And it's surprisingly quick to set these up. There are everybody has some BI tool that they're using. It's quite, even if you're just using, say, Google Sheets and updating it every week, it's quite fast to have that dashboard set up, but it really changes the way that discussion happens when you're talking about account planning and just the steering of the sales strategy and the pricing strategy on a week by week basis.
You have also a great view of how sales teams are working and responding pre and during COVID. What would you say has been markers of a really successful team, or what are the markers of a really successful team that can weather COVID type disruptions to their business plan?
So we've seen this across a number of clients. I would say the number one marker would, and maybe this is a strange way to put it, but it's almost the hyperactive sales team. And the teams that have been really effective are the ones that at the beginning of the crisis, they recognized that there was going to be a huge amount of uncertainty. They recognized that there was quite a lot of risk just in the environment. We don't know what kind, are we going to have a V-shaped recovery? Is it going to be a W-shaped, a U-shaped, an L-shaped recovery? Nobody knew. Nobody still knows, perhaps. And they got to work essentially being very active around targeting accounts, around developing new sales pitches, new approaches to their clients. So recognizing the world has changed, their clients' businesses have changed. What are the right messages that we should be bringing to our clients now that are relevant in the current environment? And really stepping up the level of activity, essentially. How many leads are they generating? How many calls are they having? How many meetings are they having? Because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So what we can do is we can just put 110% effort essentially into going after business. And where we've seen sales teams do this, and many of them have actually found that they've weathered through this with even no slowdown or even growth. So it requires, some of that is obviously business dependent. If you're in the airline business, maybe you're not feeling so good about the current demand environment, but a lot of business to business businesses, especially in technology, have found actually that they've weathered this current, at least this year, quite well. But to do that, it really requires a lot of focus and a recognition that we're in a different mode. The plans that we had at the beginning of the year were out the window, and we needed to be adaptive and try to respond as flexibly as we can to the current situation.
We're certainly developing some new sales muscles right now. What are those muscles that we're developing that are going to become the standard in B2B sales going forward?
So I think the day of getting on the plane to go have an hour meeting are possibly about over. I think it's quite interesting to see. We've had WebEx, we've had Zoom, we've had Skype, we've had video conferencing for a number of years now. And in some ways, nothing has changed, except that everybody has decided that you can actually do business on, on Zoom or on WebEx. I would just tell the personal story from the BCG standpoint. When this all started, there were a number of the partners, managing directors in BCG who were quite worried that we wouldn't be, our business would suffer if we couldn't go meet our clients and walk the halls and so forth. And about, I don't know, a month, a month and a half into the shelter in place, people started to say, you know what, actually, this is working just fine. And in fact, the fact that I don't have to get on a plane, or I can't get on a plane, means I have more time. And so some of that hyperactivity I was talking about is actually enabled by the fact that you roll out of bed and you're working, from your commute is 2 minutes, right, to your Zoom terminal, and you have all day to work on video. So that shift from needing to be in person to being able to do everything via video conference has actually created a lot of productivity gains, which I think are going to stick with us.
What do you think the essential skills have been for you to kind of manage through keeping that transition consistent?
So the activity is the same. The only difference is the way it's delivered. And so we're delivering that all obviously via Zoom and WebEx and video conference and so forth. I think that the one thing that we have had to augment quite a lot is using other tools. Using virtual whiteboarding tools, for example, using collaborative documents, Google Sheet and Docs and things like that.
Or have you had the time to reflect on how your change management has changed beyond the tool? Like, how have you adapted changing the way organizations behave to be in this new virtual environment?
So when we think about change management, when we think about getting our clients to adopt our recommendations and make changes, one of the frameworks that we use is actually my colleague Jim Hemmerling. I have to give him credit for this. He talks about head, heart, and hands as being the core elements of any change. And so, head is, of course, understanding the rationale, the logic, the analysis, and understanding what it is that needs to be changed. And then heart is like, what is the emotional resonance? How do you get the engagement? How do you get the organization to believe in the change and to want to change? And then hands is getting the stuff done, right? You actually have to do things, and you have to mobilize people and make the change happen. And that in normal times, we accomplish that by having a team of people at the client site. And so, some of that is delivered in meetings where you're presenting, that's the head part, right? Some of that is done through managing communications. So, emails and town halls and CEO addresses and so forth, that we're a bit more behind the scenes orchestrating. And then some of that is actually just doing stuff and having our teams that are there doing the work, coaching people to do the work, training people to do the work, mobilizing the organization. That's definitely harder in this environment because now all of those activities are done via video conferencing. But in a sense, our clients are in the same place. And so, they're also getting their business done through video conferencing. And in some ways, it's actually working really well. We're sort of all in the same boat. And, whether we are coaching somebody via Zoom or, they're coaching the managers coaching their staff via Zoom, it's all happening in the same sort of context. So, and I think there's a lot that we all, as the business community, still need to learn and still are learning about how digital tools can enhance what we're doing. But I will say, in some way, I was talking before about how the fact that we don't commute anymore, we don't get on an airplane anymore, has created productivity. I also think that A lot of these tools have created productivity. You know, we just did a workshop over Zoom using a virtual whiteboarding tool to do you know, brainstorming session. You know, something that we would have done normally in person with stickies on a whiteboard. We did stickies on a whiteboard, only it was all digital, and it actually worked incredibly well. So I think that we are learning new skills, and you know, as the tools also get better, as we get more, you know, more facile with these digital tools, it's definitely going to change the way that we do work, you know, with our clients and the way that our clients manage their own business.
No, Matt, it was really great to talk to you, and I really respect the amount of perspective you have, because you're talking to so many organizations and clients. You've got a great career behind you and a great organization you're within. So thank you for taking the time to share that knowledge.
Great,
and giving a little
appreciate
bit
it.
of tease.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much.